We are live. Welcome to Talking Crit. I am Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR. With me, as always on Wednesday, is my my podcast, my casting spouse. Well, that really sounds bad, having that word casting in it. But in any case, bad Mike
Go with it.
Battalato. All right,
Hello.
and with us, we have the man who took Necropolis and put it into, I guess, a modern format that's going to be usable by the masses. Mark Greenberg. Mark, thank you for joining us.
And thank you for letting me join the two of you on this exciting opportunity.
And also joining us is
stop blowing smoke. We're not that
also
excited.
joining us is my new whiskey sponsor, Woodford Reserve. So if you're out there, Woodford, come on, man, do a brother a favor.
I'm sponsored by Diet Dr. Pepper.
All right. First off, we're not sponsored by Jack or shit. However, I am drinking a red wine with a little white mixed into it, and for afterwards, I have a black cherry kickstart, so I can be bouncing off the fucking walls. You guys can all enjoy that. I'd be like, I got a little caffeine and a little sugar, and I'm ready to go. So, there. It's the usual start to one of these fine casts. We're always swell when we're doing this live. Craig, welcome.
I'm about to say, you might notice behind me I have a different background because I am doing my show. I'm so responsible. I'm doing my show even though I'm on a mini vacation with my wife, and I'm in Cedar Park, Texas, north of Austin, and we're hanging out in the suite, and we just spent a day driving around hill country. But you know what? I had to do the show. I couldn't leave Eric to do it alone. That's why I helped him out Friday.
Yep.
I had to help him out today.
You're my casting spouse that isn't on a casting couch. Ooh,
it makes it so easy now to do. You can do podcasts are so easy to do now. You just slap a camera on your old computer and you're ready to roll. So
long as you got Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi is the way. Yes, amen. We did that at North Texas. I did that from the Poconos last Wednesday, although I had to use my phone as a hotspot because the DSL at my parents' place up there sucks shit would just not be a proper terminology for it. So I was like, I'll hotspot it, and then my laptop died. So it was really great, real professional. Yeah. I had to switch my cell phone at that point, which
was fun.
Well, at least it shows that I am into the cast, and I wasn't going to let it fall.
So Mark, I don't know really where to start with this because I have watched you do about 75 interviews in the past 3 weeks. You are hitting the interview circuit hard. I mean, you must feel
you are a PEX victim.
Yeah, yes. It's like some sort of cool, strange media tour, I suppose. It's been interesting, to say the least.
I feel like we've been roommates for the past 2 weeks.
I'm sorry you had to watch that many.
I just wanted to see what they were asking you so we didn't cover the same territory. And I came to the conclusion that no matter what, we're going to end up covering the same territory, but we're also going to go a little far afield because I've known Mark for quite a few years. We actually probably met through the AKM and both knowing Bill Meinhardt. And so we've known each other for quite a while and gone to many conventions together. And, you know, I could tell you some pretty funny Mark Greenberg stories that I'll probably remember a couple of them tonight.
Little more Woodford Reserve, and it'll all come back.
But we'll start out asking
some
you about
of them may even be true.
No, I wouldn't do a true story.
Delve into that, yes.
So we have the Necropolis Kickstarter, and for those of you that don't know, this is based on something that Gary wrote in the early 90s, or late 80s.
Well, it had been bouncing around, I think, New Infinities originally.
Really?
It was the first publication, though, was by Game Designers Workshop in I want to say 92, and that was in Gary's Dangerous Journeys system, which I have to admit, I'm not sure I've ever met anybody who plays it. So
I own it, but I never played it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I actually had to buy a copy of it because I needed to have it for working on this. I did not have it before that. But then it was bought by Necromancer Games, and they put it out in 2002 as a D20 3E system. And that's the last time it was published. So, but it was by Gary, although there was actually additional stuff that I think both Bill Webb and Clark Peterson put into it when it was published by Necromancer Games too.
Right.
So now, when Necro picked it up, it means that, and this is just an observation on my point, it was not part of the IP that would fall underneath the Gary Gygax revocable trust.
No, as I understand it, it was it was acquired by Necromancer Games, the IP along with everything else.
Nice.
Now I know
otherwise you'd never see it.
I know Gary was still involved at the time. Because suffice it to say, there were a couple of strange, we'll just call them typos in the manuscript, and I'll let anybody who wants to compare the revised version against the prior version that I was a little puzzled by, and I sort of asked, well, why wasn't this caught by an editor? And people told me, and I think this is consistent with what I heard, Gary really didn't like editors. So it was edited with a very, very light touch. So part of what this was really a heavy duty edit as well as a complete revision in many respects. So
interesting. Not surprised. Am I?
So
No.
we do have somebody who played Legendary Adventures, but not Dangerous Journeys. So there you go.
And Legendary Adventures was a nice, not too complicated rule set. Dangerous Journeys was a bit too heavy for me, even when I could pick up a system like a new language real easily. It was just too much. But
so when you did this conversion, Mark, so you're sitting there, and so you've got the original one, and you've got the Necromancer one, and Frog God Games directs you. Do they tell you that they want this in 5e, or they want this in Swords Wizardry? How does this work?
So how long have you been involved with Frog God Games?
A long time.
Okay, so what kind of direction do you think I was given?
You were given
minimal,
less than I just pointed to.
Is Bill going to watch this? I may get myself in trouble.
No, Bill won't.
He doesn't watch this now.
No.
Unless he's told to watch this, in which case he probably still won't watch it.
All
He'll
right.
get a summary from one of us.
Yeah.
So the instructions were pretty minimal. What I was originally told was the manuscript is done.
Okay.
And all I needed to do was project manage it to sort of closure. And what I discovered was that basically Bill had gone through it and made annotations in the comments, using Word, change this, do this, look at this. And that was kind of it. So I was sort of told, do, whatever I wanted to do. And so I read it and I decided that it needed a pretty heavy rewrite. I mean, look, you don't get the opportunity to redo a Gary Gygax adventure very often. I mean, I don't know anybody else who ever has, frankly. So that's kind of a limited group of people. Right. But I still felt that it played a lot like some of Gary's adventures, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there are parts of it that were very 1992 or earlier in the way it played. It was a bit of a railroad in a few ways that I felt needed to be changed. And there were a lot of other things I just decided as I was going through to revise it. But look, the plot is the same. The maps are largely the same, although I changed a lot of what's in some of the rooms because I felt, hey, I could, and nobody was going to tell me I couldn't. So why not? But yeah, it was, this is still, the plot is the plot. I didn't change that. But a lot of other things did change, and a lot of the details have changed. So somebody knew the old adventure and tried to play the new one and said, "Oh, I know what happens like next." They may very well be wrong.
So they can't game it now. Okay.
You were given a pretty wide interpretation of what. You could look here. It is. Just make it work, and then you could make it work, which is actually, it's cool because you don't have somebody looking over your shoulder, dotting the T's, crossing the I, or crossing the T's, dotting the I's. But it's bad.
I know because the T's and crossing the I's, we got an issue.
But it's bad because then it's all on you. Now it's all, if something stinks, it's going to be, well, Mark screwed up the manuscript.
That's right. No. This is all on me. Now there's some things I left that were in the original because I just felt I should. So I can point my finger there if I need to. But no, this is this is me. And if people hate it, whoops, sorry. But I don't think people will. The playtesters all seem to like it. But yeah, it was sort of what did I want to do? There was, the one part of it was update it for 5e, right. and it would also be converted to Swords and Wizardry, which I think is really, the thing is this is one of Gary's last published adventures, and it's been available for anybody who plays, 3rd edition or Dangerous Journeys, but it's never been available if you wanted to play it in 1st edition or BX or 5th. And so while Swords and Wizardry is not 1st edition, or BX, it's portable. It'll be really easy to convert. So if somebody wants to play this game in 1st edition now, they can. Oh, yeah. And it'll be really easy to do it based upon the conversion. So I think that part of it's pretty cool. And look, all the kids are playing 5th now, so this enables the adventure to be played in 5th, which was in itself a challenge. I did the conversion into 5th, although we did have people check to make sure that I did it sort of right. I had no idea how many crazy rules there are when you actually do an adventure in 5th edition. So. Oh, geez.
Yeah, that's what I was interested in what you wrote it. So you actually wrote it for 5e. Yeah. And now, did you actually do the conversion to Swords and Wizardry, or somebody else do that? That is being done by, I think Jeff is doing it. Jeff Hartman. Oh, well, that's going to be good. Jeff's a good dude. He's a smart guy. Well, Jeff also did the edit, and I will tell you something. I think I'm a decent writer. I could not believe how many passive voice corrections he made and how many, inconsistent tense and everything else. The guy is like, an editing machine. He really is. It really made it so much better of a manuscript. I'm thinking like anytime I write an email, I want to send it to Jeff first so he can clean it up before I send it out. He is really awesome. He's anal, but that's what makes him awesome. Well, so my remembrance, which is very slight of the, probably not as much as although I did have the Dangerous Journey adventure. I read that thing, could never figure out how to run it, but I did remember getting the Necromancer copy. And I remember thinking, because somebody had told me years ago, this is Gary's updated, it's like Tomb of Horrors, except it's kind of updated. And I do remember going through there and going, there is a ridiculous amount of traps that will just absolutely destroy a party here. That there's no way they could get out of. So did you kind of keep that same feel? Did you update it or say, look, this is a party screw right here. I can't put this in here. How did you approach that? Well, look, this is supposed to be, the way it was described, I think the way Bill described it was supposed to be Village of Hamlet followed by Tomb of Horrors. And Gary wanted to one up Tomb of Horrors. That was part of what he wanted to do. Now, I'm not a big fan of Tomb of Horrors. I think as a con game or as a tournament,
it's
Right.
not a bad thing, right? Because you're not expecting to actually make it all the way through. The question is, you got 8 groups running through it. Who gets the furthest before they're wiped out? That makes sense. But you don't want to take beloved characters into Tomb of Horrors. And the premise of Necropolis is, you've got a whole bunch of stuff before you even get to the tomb. There's a village to explore. There's the environment around the village. There's NPCs to meet. You've got overland. There's other stuff to do long before you get to the tomb. I think this is months of gameplay if you play it out and you only play once a week. So, you're going to have characters that you maybe your campaign characters, or at least the ones you played a long time. And you don't want to walk into a room and have the ceiling collapse and everybody die. That's what's the point? Yeah. That being said, it is supposed to be deadly, and I could not eliminate that without changing the adventure. So, but what I did then was, there's a lot of places, and if you've read any of Gary's stuff, that there's a lot of places where there's sort of a randomness to whether you live or die or you succeed in a room. You have to do the one right thing, and you can't actually figure out what the right thing is. You just have to try things, and half the things you're going to try are going to kill half the party. The example I've used before is, it's like, you walk into a room, a stone block falls and blocks you in. There's a lever on the wall. If you push it up, a door opens and you get out. If you push it down, the ceiling collapses and everybody dies, no save, and there's no way to figure out which one is which. That's sort of a classic kind of Gary Tomb of Horrors-y kind of thing. And there were a number of those in Necropolis. So in a few places, I just totally changed it. In a number of places, I left the basic idea intact, but I put something in that if the party is paying attention, being careful, they can figure it out. Or at least they can bias the decision, so they're much more likely to succeed than fail. But you got to be a careful, thoughtful party. And if you're a bunch of murder hobos just looking to kill the next creature, and the thief's not checking for traps, and you're just plowing your way through, you're probably going to die. And even if you play well, somebody asked me whether or not it's all traps, and it's not. There's a lot of combats in this as well. It's not just traps. And when I ran the tomb in one of the play tests, which was for my home group, and so they know me, I know them. They play really well. Bill Meinhardt is part of that group.
Please tell me you killed him. Please tell me you killed Bill.
I can't actually tell you what I did to him, because that would be a spoiler. Okay. That would be a spoiler.
Oh.
But you did something to him, so I'm
there was something pretty funny. Okay. But I can't say it because that really is a spoiler. But the last encounter they got themselves into, and it was a little bit of a haphazard. They weren't prepared for it. They just sort of, they managed to get in safely, and then they were just getting creamed. And this is in 5e, and we ended up calling it at about midnight, but it was going to be a TPK. I'm pretty confident. I don't see any way the party got out of it. Where they were at, and they were playing pretty well. They just had blundered a bit into the last into that room. So it's still hard, but it's not nonsensically hard. It actually does make sense, which was kind of important to me. I mean, I never understood Tomb of Horrors. A Sararak, what it says is he's traveling other planes, and he wants to be left alone. He just wants to be left alone. Well, then why did he bother with this whole tomb complex?
Please come in my tomb.
Collapse everything, leave the one room where his skull is at, and he's happy as a clam. But no, he's got to have all these little rooms and poems and hints so people can find him and disturb him? Why? It doesn't make any sense. So, who is the authoritative sounding guest? I have no idea.
We don't know either.
It's time to time to start talking crit about Zach.
That's Zach's trolling us.
I understand.
I don't know if you know, but he and Skeeter have a show. I don't even remember the name of it is because I really don't watch.
It's interesting. I haven't been invited onto that one, so it's obviously an extremely low quality, lowbrow.
They've got like 35 subscribers. It's public access.
Are you sure they have subscribers?
Well, no, we're public access, so they're below us.
But yeah, he gets real jealous when we have really important guests like Mark Greenberg on, and he tries to troll. It's real sad. It's very sad.
It is. It's sad. It's very sad.
Skeeter is the guest relations guy. That's your problem sad. Right there. I am going to point to your number one problem, and it's right there.
Threats of physical violence do not bring guests onto the show.
Hate and fear do not necessarily work as much as kind words. But, you run your show like you want to run your show. That's great.
Absolutely.
So this is the first project you've done.
No. This is the second project I've done.
You also had a project called The Lost Lands that was.
Yeah. I get to market my book. Look at that. See right
if you want to talk about. Somebody said, you know what? I'm going to whip your ass. What can I give you? I would have said, well, give me The Lost Lands and give me 20-something years of lore, and I'm going to stick it all in one book together. But you're not going to do that to me because I'll jump off a bridge first before you get it to me. And you said, hey, that sounds fun. Give me all the Lost Lands shit, and I'm going to put it in one big reference book.
You see, this is the beauty of you see, this is Bill's brilliance. I just retired. I announced on Facebook that, I'd given my notice and I was retiring at the end of the year. And one of the first people who messages me is Bill Webb. And he's like, you want to write for me? And first of all, I'm thinking, well, this is kind of crazy because, I haven't written anything in the gaming industry. I have no publishing credibility at all. But I'm like, sure, fine. You want me to do something? Yeah, I can probably do one of my adventures because I've been DMing for 30 years and I've got something I can probably put together that maybe you might be willing to publish. And he says, I got a different idea for you. How would you like to do a world guidebook for my campaign world? It's like, I guess. And I still have this image in my mind of him having talked to everybody at Frog God and then anybody he knew in the industry, and everybody's saying, "Are you crazy? There's no way." And I'm like the last guy, and he's like, "I hope he says yes," and he doesn't know enough to say no. So I guess sure. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into at all. That being said, it really was a fun project. It drove me crazy, and there's still a couple things that bug the heck out of me. We did finally fix one of them, which is I never occurred to me to put an index of locations into the book, and so even I can't find things sometimes. But I know that an index was finally put together mainly by me, and is available and was made available to people. So it is out there, but it's not part of the book. But it is it was an insane effort.
It was backwards. It was backwards because here we have. So instead of saying here's our game world, The Lost Lands, and here's a book about the game world, and then you build on that lore, right? That's how game companies do it. And then each book that comes out eventually, you build on the lore. No, Frog God Games took 20 years of lore already written. Oh, now we're going to write the book that has all that stuff in there. It'd be like if they were going to do the World of Greyhawk box set, but they decided to do it yesterday instead of when World of Greyhawk came out in 1978. Oh no, we're going to do it. We're going to do it yesterday. So everything that's already happened has to be put in this book. And
just to be clear, there was no way to make it all consistent. It was absolutely impossible because you had, you must have had 30 or 40 authors over the course of the history of the game company writing adventures, and some of them were just outright inconsistent. But they all had to somehow fit in. So somebody had to make a decision as to how to make it consistent. And again, the great part about this one was it isn't like anybody was, yes, Jeff edited me, but it was copy editing. Nobody edited me for like content. So I would just pick. And occasionally I would actually ask somebody if there was a preference one way or the other. And usually the answer was no. But yeah, it was now the best parts actually were the sections that, had never been done before. And, there were a number of things that I got to do. I did parts of Foer, which is sort of the old kingdom that is in decline, and a couple other places where there really was very little written. And so I got to actually just be, so we had like, I can't remember, we had 6 or 8 authors basically. And so everybody took like a region. And so I got a region as well. And then everybody would send me the manuscript, and then I would have to edit everything into coherence, because of course you'd have people who would write something about conflicts between one of their nations and the neighboring nation that somebody else had, where they didn't write anything about a conflict ever going on. So the continuity was really hard. I mean, I did have to rewrite large sections just because of that. You get the
part. I mean, we're talking over, 15, 18 years. You're also talking about where you're probably reading through there, and it turns out there's 6 temples to the rat god. You're like, okay, one of these has to be the real temple of the rat god. These 3 guys, 15 years apart, all put a temple of the rat god. But I'm not saying there actually was a temple of the rat god, but I'm saying you probably had stuff like that, right?
There were several times where the same name was used multiple times, and in a few cases I changed it. In other cases, I just left it as it was, and there's a comment that says this is different than. And that's even the case with like one of the deities or something, because somebody used the same deity name a couple of different times. And so we actually built in Vicky Potter, one of the phenomenal authors that I worked with, had caught it and said, well, we're just going to say that this other culture is abhors arguments that or claims that their god by this name has anything to do with this other god of the exact same name.
Very true.
And that was the best. Nice. That was the best you could do. Some things you just couldn't entirely fix, but it was really insane. I mean, I think it was about a 1.5-year project, basically. I still remember we were sitting in the Bill Meinhardt's basement, actually, and Bill Webb had come in, and Zach was there, and we put Zach had printed the then current version of the world map with everything on it, and we laid it on the pool table, and we literally went through region by region, every single dot and name on the map, went back to the manuscript and looked at it to figure out whether it matched, and then wrote comments so I could go back to re-edit everything. It was, I mean, we literally spent 2 full days poring over the map. Wow. There still is, and I will not say where it is. I did, like, within 2 or 3 weeks of the Kickstarter, like everything going out, I found a typo on the map. Nobody to this day has caught it. I challenge anybody to find it. Yeah, I'll sign a copy of Necropolis, and I'll give a free copy to anybody who finds it.
Well, so that was your first project, and I can't believe you got hooked into Necropolis after doing that. You probably
remember, I was sold on it by the manuscripts already done.
Yeah.
Oh,
supposedly. Yeah, it was already done. Yeah.
It was not already done. No. I mean, this has been a good year work on this. I mean, and it isn't like it's. I'm not doing like 8 hours a day, 7 days a week on it, but it was a lot of work. It was. I think the only person who may come anywhere near the hours I put into this is Alyssa Faden on the map of the tomb, because she put an insane amount of time on that map.
The details
I've seen her
amazing,
live stream.
sure.
She drew the maps. It's pretty amazing. But she that's just her and maps. Period. So that's great stuff. Yeah.
There are so many Easter eggs in that in her map. It's just outrageous. It really is. Even I don't know where they all are. So there's still one that you told me about that I've been looking for. I can't find it.
Jeez.
Has anyone here played Rappin' Athic or any of the great Necromancer Frog God modules? I don't know. Have you guys ever DM'd
I
or
played
played
parts of
one?
Rappin' Athic. Yeah,
I ran Rappin' Athic for I ran it for about 6 months, and the campaign came to a screeching halt when my party found the magical slot machines, and we spent a session and a half with them gambling their lives away, and then it was like, oh, I guess that's where the campaign ends.
And you all died.
And you all dead. There we go.
Great.
You pushed your luck just a bit too far. Well, what's next? No, it's a really, it's a classic mega dungeon that you will use as much as your party wants or as little as your party wants. It's fulfilling no matter how far they get. If they'd gotten farther, I would have probably killed them like a half dozen sessions later anyway. So
yeah, I don't know anybody who like plays through a mega dungeon and just the mega dungeon, because it's kind of hard to do that all the time. You need a mental break to do something else,
right?
But everybody in their world has one mega dungeon, but it's like, yeah, we'll go in there for a while and we'll go leave and do something else for a while, I think. Right. But my question is, has anybody ever played the Blight?
No, but it does have its fans. It's very much a cult favorite, and at the time it was a I don't know, it was a ball buster. I mean, because it was so huge, and there was so many different people that had to work on it, and it was kind of late, and it just was just a big, just kind of a mess. But in the last few years, it's kind of gotten a cult reputation, and I know there's some people that did a podcast based on a Blight play, and we still get asked about it quite a bit. So it's interesting. I think everybody enjoys the setting a lot because it's not the goody two shoes setting. Most of the other realms are.
I think the setting is really interesting. I mean, part of the problem, going back to the Lost Lands, fitting it into the Lost Lands was hard because because the Blight. And it's there, Casterhage is there on the world map. So I couldn't just say, oh, it's not here, but its technology level has nothing to do with the rest of the world. It fits very awkwardly. So there's actually, if you go to, if you look in the world book, I actually have, there's a side box near technology, because there's two places that are a problem. The Blight Casterhage is one, and the other one is if you put Razor Coast into the world.
Sure, yeah. Because
now Razor Coast is not in the world book, but it is understood to be in the world of the Lost Lands, somewhere to the southwest, in the ocean. But they've got firearms and cannons. Casterhage is described as having ironclad warships. Well, why aren't they beating the living shit out of Bard's Gate, which has bows and arrows? Now you could argue, oh, maybe it's magic, maybe whatever, but they got magic too. So there's actually a side box where I basically said, look, I got rid of all the references to ironclads. I got rid of all the references to firearms and gunpowder, black powder, in the world book. But I said, look, if you as a DM want to have it in there, and either you don't mind the inconsistency, or you can find a solution, right? You could say that, for example, gunpowder only works in the Razor Coast area for some magical reason, and you take the same stuff onto Akados and it's inert. You can come up with sort of lots of reasons why.
Well, in real life, I mean, the real world, we've had technology develop it. I mean, look at the Lost Lands. I mean, that world, if it was a world, would be as big as Jupiter. I mean, it's freaking, it's humongous.
It's not actually that big. That's what everybody says.
Right.
It's about twice I think it's twice the diameter of Earth, so it's nowhere near as big as Jupiter, but it literally is twice as big as the Earth.
But if you look if you look at Earth, we had, look at how Chinese civilization developed compared to South America or Europe. I mean, you had different levels of civilization all the time.
Right, but then if they could contact each other, you then had massive colonization and invasions, and you don't see that in the Lost Lands. You don't see Casterhage and the people from the Razor Coast occupying Bard's Gate, which they would,
right?
In the world is postulated. Or what would happen is Bard's Gate and Ream and the other major cities, would quickly adopt the same technology. They'd get the same technology. Everybody would have firearms, and it would be a different campaign world. And so, that's why you'd have to come up with some way as a DM to explain. And like I said, there's lots of ways to do it.
Yeah. You have gods and magic, something that, I mean, you have actual gods and you have actual magic, which is what we don't have on Earth, that we know of. And so, so that's your big game changer right there, because once you have gods and magic, almost anything's possible or impossible. Yeah.
I see Zach is piping in with some of the other adventures he likes. Isn't Elemental Moon? That's the one in
he's pimping future. Those are future products.
That's in Hawk Moon, I think.
Right. That also came out. That was a Die 23. Freya's a very good low level adventure campaign type thing. So yeah, we've got some good stuff still coming out. But yeah, if you haven't delved into the Forgotten Realms, good lord, the Lost Lands, it's a great setting because it's so wide open that there's so like one thing as I look at settings. That's one thing I liked about the Forgotten Realms setting when it first came out. We're talking about the gray box, is that it was really left underdeveloped. So, okay, there's a nation over here. These guys are there's red wizards. They're bad people. Here's an Egyptian land here. Here's a kingdom over here. Here's a shire here. And here's a jungle here and whatever. Do whatever you want. And it wasn't until later on that became so homogeneous. They just went in almost too much detail. And that's what I like about the Lost Lands. I don't think it has that level of too much detail yet. I think it gives you
certain areas. If you want to play in the Southern Kingdoms or areas in the eastern half of Akados, it's very well understood. But you're right. There's most of the other areas. There's one or two adventures at most, and actually. And I haven't decided exactly what I'm doing next, but I'm not doing somebody else's work. And I actually have an idea of something I want to do in the Lost Lands in an area that nobody has written an adventure for at all yet. Ooh. And that's nice and open. And so I can do whatever I want. But you're right. There's huge areas that have names and a couple of towns. And, that was part of the fun part, actually, was throwing in a couple of these hints and ideas in the Lost Lands that I just came up with when I had an open area for somebody to make something of, or not, as the case may be. So every 5-foot square is a write-up in some book or the other in Forgotten Realms.
They had the Volo's guidebooks. The Volo's guidebooks were really good books, but they also tended to minutiaize. Here's an inn along this road that's this, and yes, every 10 miles they would tell you what was going on. But in their defense, that was when they were just looking for content to publish. I mean, the beast has to feed itself, right? So that's right. Here's the gray box. The gray box is a great sandbox. It's one of the best sandbox products ever published. But then after that, we're going to talk about Waterdeep, and then Moonshade, and then Bloodstone Lands, and so after a while, then you get 10 years later, and it's just like, good lord, I know there's too much to know now.
Part of what I loved about the Forgotten Realms, and I'll date myself a little bit, because I remember reading, when Ed Greenwood was writing for Dragon magazine before the Forgotten Realms was published, he'd do these articles and he'd have something about Elminster, or he'd do something about magical items or whatever, and it was so mystical because you didn't know where anything was on a map. You didn't know but you could feel how big this world was, how cool this world was. And, it's like anything, it's the same thing with like a horror movie. Something's always scarier when you can't see it. As soon as you can see it and it looks a little CGI, or it looks like a guy in a suit, it's not as scary. The world gets smaller as soon as you start explaining all of it. Right. And having that mystery, having the holes, like the old maps that said, there be dragons, or, putting islands in the middle of the ocean because nobody really knew what was there. That's what makes the world magical. And there's a lot of room still for that, fortunately, in the Lost Lands. So it'd be a lot less the case. Your Forgotten Realms, you're almost certainly writing about some area that somebody's already talked about.
And that's too bad, because it was. I mean, but it's reality, right? That you gotta publish products. So
that's if you're not coming out with a new edition of the game, you got to come up with something else.
Hey, money is what feeds the beast, and money is what keeps the hobby going. I mean. We talk about 5e. It's 5e is the rising tide that has lifted all ships. Yeah. And you look at publishers like Frog God, like Troll Lord Games is publishing for 5e, and you're like, but they have their own system, and people go, whoa, Frog God has their own system. If you only write for your own system, you're not going to be making the money to keep your company vibrant.
Right. Well, and frankly, you want to have as big an audience as possible, right?
Yes.
That's speaking just now as an author, I want as many people to read this thing as possible, and I actually want people to play it. And so I want it to be in as many systems as possible, so that people get to play it. But there's also the business requirement, that it's got to make money for the company. It doesn't have to make a lot of money, but it's got to make money. It can't, you can't manage this if you're losing money on every book.
Unless you're good. Well, I guess Goodman Games, they have their own system. They've done reasonably well, but they've marketed their DCC product really, really well. I think probably about as good as you could do, because they've also come out with Lankmar and different systems. They've really stuck with that Appendix N feel. They have Jack Vance Worlds out now. They had a Fred Saberhagen. I mean, they're just really, they're doing a really good market what they have, and they have pretty much a really loyal cult audience. But everybody else, it's really hard if you're not doing 5e. It's really tough to do anything unless you're Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu or Goodman Games is about it. I mean, everybody else seems to be, you got to have a 5e version of that for that to really succeed. Yeah,
I think that's right at this point. My home game is a 5e game, and I grew up playing first edition, AD&D. But 5e, and I know people who are introducing their kids, to gaming, and they pick 5e because that's what the kids are going to be playing, right? You can have them play first edition, but they're not going to find a group of people their age who are going to want to play that, and that's just the real world right now.
Goodman does do 5e, but unlike most companies, it's more of a sideline. Their main product is DCC, and they do some 5e. Whereas I would say, like Frog God, our main line of stuff is probably 5e. Now we do obviously do Swords and Wizardry too, because that's our system.
Yeah, but you know what? I will say the Goodman Games 5e stuff sells a crap ton. It's available on Amazon because they are taking the classic adventures and they are rewriting them for 5e. So
right.
It's representing stuff that they're hitting two markets. They're hitting the nostalgic market. Oh, look, Temple of Elemental Evil being redone and rewritten. And I'm going to get the original version, which might be beaten up as my copy, and I'll get a 5e version and some behind-the-scenes stuff and a hardback for $50. Sometimes it's hard to pass that up. So they're working two markets with those, which is not foolish.
They
at
do
all.
great.
Pretty
That's a
smart.
great those books are really a great format because you get the original adventure, and then you get the 5e adventure, and then you also get a lot of the little extra material, which is usually really interesting.
Yeah, so that is a fact that, again, even Goodman, who, like Mike says, DCC RPG is such a huge driver for them, but even they realize that you got to bring in a 5e, and just by bringing in 5e players for their classic releases, now you're exposing them with the ads in the back to DCC RPG, and exposure is what's going to get you more players for your main line. So they're working it well.
That's the only reason I do this thing is because exposure. I'm doing this with Eric.
Well, thank God you're keeping your clothes on, because else it would be a bad exposure. And then
I have to have IMDb credits for Hollywood, so this is gonna be my.
Wait a minute, I get an IMDb credit for this?
Sure,
no.
Why not?
No. Just like we don't have a sponsor, it's a whiskey sponsor. We don't get. You might at some point get like RPG Geek, but you already have that for your writing credits and everything else. So
I guess.
No, you do. I would think you do, Mark. You've done some great work in the industry.
Well, let's get this one out. We'll see what
it's up to 75,000 now. I think it's got 9 days left. There's an off chance we could get 100 with this, right? What do you think? I mean, I think it's going to do really well.
I sure hope so. I mean, like I said, I think this is. I think it fills a position that not a lot of games hit. Because it's sort of, you're starting at a higher level and you can get to decently high level,
right.
And it's sort of a different product from what's out there. It's not just a dungeon, but it's also not purely like a like an adventure path where it's A, B, C, D, E. There's some flexibility for the DM to build in a lot of time wasting or fun stuff where you do other stuff too. So, I don't know. It's I sure hope we get to at least 100,000. I'd love to get a little higher than that. I'd love to get all of our stretch goals in. We'll see what happens.
See, now you're gonna make me look at the stretch goals. Hold on a second.
Oh dear, yeah. There's some good stuff.
Well, what I really wanted to get to was Temple of Set, which I think is the last current one. And
all right, let's see. Handout of the Nomads account and map done.
Okay, and actually, I got to talk about that one for a second. I really do, because Kafir Mendel, Cave Geek, has done the Nomads account and the Nomads map.
Nice.
And I just, it was last week he sent me. I mean, it's being done. I don't know how he does it. It's done electronically.
Right.
I may actually ask him to do it really on leather, because that's his thing. If you go to his website,
he does amazing work.
It is phenomenal. But even the electronic version of the map is just awesome. It really is. And then we struggled a bit with the Nomads account, and I don't want to spoil anything, but initially, like with the font, it was going to be way too long, and we didn't want it to be that long. And it came up with a great solution, and it just looks incredible. So I'm really happy with what he's done, and that's one of the great parts about working on these Kickstarters. For the frogs, is I get to work with these really talented people who can take my ideas and make art out of them, which, I am a stick figure type of artist. So
I can't even do that.
It is just incredible.
So I could do stick figure art, and I still can't do it. So I envy artists.
So in any case, the map, and everybody's getting that electronically now because we hit the stretch goal. So it's going to be really awesome.
Digital character sheets for Swords of Wizardry in 5e. Desert Encounter map, digital. Customer appreciation cards, physical.
And I guess these customer appreciation cards are kind of this new thing that I think the frogs are going to do for going forward, where they're going to be, I don't know if they're going to, I think they're going to be numbered or something. So they become like little collectible cards.
I want Zach
Oh,
to
wow.
I want Zach to make mine 100 words or more, and about how much he appreciates me as a customer. That's what I would like to see.
Actually, I think maybe he could just do a handwritten, customer appreciation card to everybody who backs the Kickstarter.
I think it'd be a great idea, because I wanted to try to get
3x5 index card. Come on.
We're only a little over 1,000.
I wanted to get Matt Finch to sign every copy of Swords and Wizardry box set, and I was voted down. I don't understand, because I think that would have been a great extra thing to have. That have been. I think that's a smart. It was only 1,000. There was only 3,000 copies of the original.
Yeah, that shouldn't take very long.
It's an afternoon, probably. Maybe.
What else has he got to do except managing Zach?
The guy has nothing to do. Believe me, he's a creative. He's one of those creative types. He's always doing whatever creative type.
Well, he was also a lawyer too. So.
Those guys are the worst. The worst.
I know.
So speaking of lawyer, which you once were, and if you retired now. So I want to tell a funny story, because when I first met you. Well, we kind of met through the AKM and collectors back in probably 2006, 5, right in that range.
Yep.
But the first time I ever met you was at Gen Con 2007, I think.
That sounds about right.
The reason I knew you is because you bought all of Tim Cast's clothes, which I thought was an odd collecting niche to fill. And I soon found that when I go to conventions, you were always buying Tim Cast's clothes. So it became more of, and it wasn't much of a niche anymore. It was kind of a creepy fetish at that point. Can you tell us how this came about?
Do you know how it began?
I think you told me before, but go ahead and tell the story.
Okay. So I'm not going to remember which Gen Con it was, but and Tim has been an auctioneer at the Gen Con auction forever. And whichever year this was, I'd have to think real hard about which year, he decided to put up something from his personal collection to the auction for charity. And his charity was, I may get the name wrong, Fishing Without Boundaries, I think, which provided opportunities to go fishing and similar types of outdoor experiences for people with disabilities. Phenomenal charity. And so he would put something up at the very end of the auction to raise money for his charity. And so he decided that he was going to put something special up that year. And if you recall from Village of Hamlet, there is a druid called Jaru Ashstaff in the Village of Hamlet. And the character is described as having an ash staff, which is how he got his name. Well, it turns out that Tim came up with the name for that character because he had a staff in his office that he had bought years before at Gen Con that he came to describe as the Jaru Ash Staff or Jaru's Ash Staff. So he decided he's going to put this staff that inspired the name of that druid up for auction. And I was bidding on it. And I was bidding against one other person. Ultimately, at the end, lots of people were bidding, but eventually it was down to me and this other guy. And Tim says, not only, I can't do a good Tim cast, maybe one of you guys can. Not only am I going to give you the staff, I'm going to give you the hat off my head. And he pulls off his the fishing hat type thing that he's got. He's like, I'll give you this too. And so, of course, I'm like, hey, I'll another $50 for that or whatever I threw in it or something. And so this guy and I are going back and forth, and I hate to say this, I don't remember how much I was at. Probably for the best, or at least if my wife could hear me, probably for the best for me not to say.
Oh God, yeah.
So I get, I bid a number, and then Tim goes to the next increment at this point, which is I don't know if it was 25 or 50 bucks or whatever it was. And the guy is literally looking at his wallet. He's got his wallet out and he's literally counting the bills. And he can only get like $11 into the next increment. And he says, well, you take 11 more. And I said, you can't do that. That's the increment. And he's like, that's all I got. And I said, I'm going to outbid you anyway then. And so I went to the next increment, and so I won the staff, and I got the hat. And Tim signs the hat to me, and I take the hat home. And so after that, every time anything came up that Tim was selling, he'd say, and I got my hat, Mark. You want my hat too? Add to the collection.
It's true. It's so true.
And so it's like, fine, Tim, I'll buy this too for the charity, and I'll take your hat. And then it became T-shirts, and it became and one time on a total lark, and I still have this somewhere. I don't know where it is. I think it was probably at North Texas. He says, I got something for you. I'm like, okay.
Because I know you like my clothes.
He had the old, like the suit carrier that he had from when he worked at. It's hard to imagine Tim in a suit. I got to admit, I can't.
Yeah, I don't see it.
I can't envision it. But I guess as publisher of Dragon magazine, he had to wear a suit sometimes. What is the resale value? I got bad news. I got like 7 of them.
He's cornered the market, so he's going to set the market when the time comes. He's setting the market.
Gary made me wear a suit when I had a Dragon magazine.
I have more Tim Cascats than Tim does. So he actually brings for me this like it's like the suit. I don't know what you call it, like the thing you put a suit in with like this big metal piece that would hold multiple suits in it. And I guess he had taken that on the on the airplane, and he put it in his carry-on. And I guess it looked like some sort of weird, massive switchblade. So he got stopped at security. They want, what the heck? Because nobody makes these things anymore.
No.
So somewhere in my house, I've got Tim Kask's suit bag as well. You
feel bad because you're like, I got a bid on it because the guy brought it for me, but I don't really want his suit bag.
Actually, he just gave that one to me. That was a gift.
God, that's funny. Okay, well, he got off easy on that one.
But
that is a great story.
But yeah, I mean, it's so I became known as the guy who collected Tim's,
who buys Tim Kask's clothes.
Oh. So, but you know, like I said, it was for a really good charity. He always did that for charity. It wasn't for him or himself. And I think that was just phenomenal for him to do that. So it was and I got a cool story, and I own Drew Ash staff, and I've got a lot of hats. So if I want to wear a hat at a con, I could wear a different hat every day.
And when you keel over someday and we go through there and your friends paw through your stuff, we're all going to pick a hat, every one of us. And there'll be enough for every one of your friends because you have so many hats. We'll all get a hat.
Because God knows my kids do not want Tim Kask's hat.
You mean they don't go, Dad, man, I really want to wear this hat to school today. Can I wear Tim Kask's hats?
I want the Civil War hat that the North wore. That's the hat that I want you to leave for me in my will.
Yeah, I want his fishing hat from the Gen Con 2010. Damn it!
My oldest son is the only one out of my 3 boys who's a gamer. Actually, my middle son is a video gamer, but that's different. But in terms of tabletop gaming, only my oldest. And he said the only thing he wants from me is I bought one of those cool gaming tables years ago from the company that no longer is in business, whose name escapes me. It is a really awesome. It is a really awesome table, and that my son wants.
So he doesn't want the Klingon table, because now I get to bring up the Klingon table, because I also remember when you won a pro. So tell us about the table that you say you're sitting at right now, correct?
So I'm right next to it, and I'd probably kill myself with the cords if I tried to turn this thing around. So I'm not going to do that. But it's funny. So the Gen Con auctions were my first experience really ever with auctions. And I've seen Mark buy a hat in auction. It's a thing. Thank you, Bill. Only one? I'd expect it would have been a lot more than one.
I've seen him
now.
buy like 5 myself. Good Lord. Come on, man.
Anyway, so I decided, I decided I would actually check out like real auctions, and it turns out about, I don't know when it was. Maybe it may have been 2007, 2008, somewhere in that time frame. Paramount Studios put up at Christie's everything they had in the warehouse that was Star Trek, everything, including the original massive Enterprise E from Next Generation. And I think it was the Enterprise. I can't remember if it was the B or the C from one of the movies. And these things are just, they're just gargantuan, things. They put up the original Deep Space Nine model, which was like 6 or 7 feet across. And then it had lots of little stuff. It was just lots of stuff they put up at Christie's. And I decided, yes, Geek Chic. Thank you, Kurt. That is correct. Geek Chic was the table manufacturer. So I decided I'm going to go to the Christie's auction. It's in New York. I could mix it with a business trip, so I could at least use, I could justify part of my time visiting clients, but during the day for like 2 or 3 days, whatever it was, I actually attended the auction. And when you attend an auction, you sort of feel compelled to kind of buy something. And so I ended up buying 3 things total. I picked up some Jem'Hadar rifles. I think there were 3 of them. One of them I gifted to Bill Meinhardt, and so if you go to his collection, you'll see a Jem'Hadar rifle from Deep Space Nine. And they're basically just resin. They're not real rifles. Hopefully, everybody understands that that's not a real thing. But they're made out of resin, but they're cool. So I still have 2 of them. One of which I dropped and it cracked because
Oh no.
Whatever. The second thing was actually a costume. What I wanted to get was one of the Q costumes, but those went for a fortune. But you remember the episode? I don't know if you were a Next Generation watcher, but I remember the episode where they go on the holodeck and they go back into Robin Hood, and Picard becomes Robin Hood, and I am not a merry man from Worf. I picked up the costume that was worn by the guy who played Sir Guy of Gisborne, who, if I recall correctly, I think he may have been the guy who played Palpatine in the first Star Wars, or maybe it was Empire, but not Return. So I've got a costume from a Star Trek episode, which is kind of cool. I actually wore it at one gen. I think, now that I think about it, I think I was wearing that costume because it barely fits me when I bought Drew Ashstaff. That's the only time I've ever gone in. It's the only time I've ever gone in costume to Gen Con. And then the third thing I picked up was a desk. And if you've been to Christie's, unlike the Gen Con auction, you see it, right? They hold it up. Christie's is just a book. Now, there were 3 or 4 things that were there, but it's just a book. And I'm flipping through it, and there's this desk, and it's a Klingon desk. And it looks really cool. And it says, hey, this was actually in an episode. It turns out it was in an episode of Enterprise, where Archer is being he's being put on trial by the Klingons, and so there's a Klingon judge, which this massive desk, and he uses this huge claw hammer basically to pound the table with. They put up the claw hammer and they put up the desk, and the claw hammer, I forget what that went for. It went for an outrageous sum of money. But I decided, I could use a desk in my house. And so I started bidding on the desk. And I paid way, way too much for it, needless to say. But I ended up actually winning the Klingon desk. What I did not appreciate when I bought it was the size of the Klingon
Oh,
desk.
jeez.
It is, I mean, I'm looking at it. I mean, it's probably about 8 feet by maybe 6 in size. It is made out
Ew.
of wood and metal.
Good Lord.
It probably weighs, I don't know, 200 pounds. So I get home and I show my wife what I got. I try to hide how much I paid, but she asked. And she's like, "Did you look at the size of the desk?" And I'm like, well, no, I thought it would go right over there. She says, "Read it." And oh shit.
It's like Spinal Tap. It's like Spinal Tap.
I had no idea. Fortunately, my home office where I'm currently sitting is just inside the front door. Having this thing moved here because it was in a warehouse somewhere outside of New York City. I think it was in somewhere in New Jersey is where Christie's has their warehouse. And they shipped this thing. It probably cost me almost as much to ship it as it did to buy it. And it's enormous and it's dangerous. I mean, it's got sharp edges because it was never really designed for. Fortunately, I don't have any young kids around here at this
Well, it's
point.
Klingon. I mean, they don't care if you bounce into it and hurt yourself.
It is
Who cares?
and on top of that, what I didn't realize until I got it home was the top of it lights up. There's actually a plug you can plug it in,
nice.
and part there's like an inset of part of the top that lights up. So it is really cool. It's the desk that I use, when I move, I don't know, my movers are going to kill me because it'll
survive longer than any three of us here. It's going to last longer than us. I've seen a picture of it. It's pretty much massive and solid. So it's not.
But there was a brief period of time where I really got into these auction things, and auctions are dangerous. They're really dangerous because you start getting you get emotional. It's like, I can't lose this. I got to win this. So it's usually better just not to bid.
Yeah, well, it's more fun to watch Guppy and Meinhardt bid against each other, and throw Emery in there too. Well, watch those three bid against each other. It is to bid anyway. I mean, it's definitely an audience sport.
It can definitely be a show. I will say this. I am glad because I've got my collection's nowhere near the size of Bill's or Jeff Emery's. But I got a lot of stuff, and I'm glad that I got it when I got it because now,
definitely.
I mean, prices are just insane.
I did the bulk of my collecting when internet started, probably from 92 to 99. And I think that was one of the perfect times. I mean, the perfect time was to get in when Bill was in the 80s, when everything was worth nothing. But the 90s, it worked out really good because I was able to complete my Middle Earth collection, my Judges Guild collection. I mean, a lot of third-party stuff all during the 90s before that stuff was really crazy. Now, once eBay started in 98, that's when the price creep started. At first it wasn't that much at first, but it started going up and up, and here we are today where stuff I saw the recent auction on the Daystar modules is up to about 7,000 a piece for Rahasia and Pharaoh and all those original Daystar ones written by the Hickmans. Yeah,
because you just can't find those. I mean, I'm glad I got I do have a Pharaoh and a Rahasia, as well as the two. I was involved in
Brimstone and the other one.
The group that published Eye of the Dragon and Brimstone, and so I am just thrilled that I got them when I did because Alex Kammer's been trying to get a Rahasia and he can't find one.
He can't find it.
I can't remember if he has one, but it's low quality or it doesn't have one. But
you used to be
they
able
don't
to
come
go
up
to Gen
anymore.
Con. They used to be at Gen Con. I remember you go to Gen Con, and every once in a while there'd be one at Gen Con or one at auction. But you're right; they're not coming up now for any price. And when they do sell, it's for a factor of X amount over what the last one sold for. And you're seeing that with the Orange B3s now. You're seeing that with the wood grain sets, the first prints. A lot of that stuff that you could find. I mean, it was pricey, right? But I mean, you could find it now. You better take out a loan on the house because that
Yeah.
stuff has just got crazy price.
That's right. And I, you know, I keep having discussions with other people about when it's going to end or if it's going to end. And it's hard to say because with the game as popular as it is, you know, it's hard to see them falling out of favor. But I mean, you know, like baseball cards or comic books, ultimately the prices do go up and down. So yeah, eBay is terribly addictive if you aren't careful. Yep, it absolutely is. There are and I have to admit, I'm kind of bad because I'm one of the guys who snipes on eBay, and I do that largely because it protects me. Because if I've picked my high bid, and I bid like, you know, an hour or 2 days or even 10 minutes before the end, and I'm outbid, then it's like, well, I got to bid more. I can't lose this. But if I put in my high bid with only about 3 seconds left, I don't have time to put in another one.
No regrets, man. You're just going full bore.
And either I win or I lose, and it's all over.
I'm very happy to have collected my collection when I did, and there's really very few things that tempt me now. I see things that I don't have, like let's say Rahasia, but I don't feel that. I guess I moved past that in my life where I don't feel that overwhelming need to have it, because you have that. There's a certain point when you're a collector like we are, you do have that overwhelming need sometimes. Like I've got to have, and mine was with third-party companies like the Companions or Midkey. I had to have everything from that company. No matter how obscure. And then that urge, once you have it, at least for me, it dulled dulled eventually. And there's not a lot I look for at this point. I actually, if I do collect stuff, it's probably the newer OSR stuff. I love obscure OSR stuff, especially since, you know, stuff that's been published since 2005, 2006. I love looking at some of the, I don't think it'll ever be worth very much, but it's fun to find that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of limiting myself now to stuff that either I'm going to use or like Kickstarters where I'm backing a friend's project. You know, I know somebody and of course I'm going to back that, right? Because you know, this is somebody I know and I want to help them succeed. So I'll back their project. I'm really down to a small number of extraordinarily obscure rare items that frankly, if they came up, wouldn't go for much because they're so ridiculously rare and obscure. Nobody else is looking for them.
Yes.
That's sort of where I'm at now. I mean, I've decided that I'm pretty much done with what I need because I've really got those things that I really want. So.
And that's a good place to be, isn't it? Because then you, like I said, you don't feel that overwhelming need, and that way you just bid on things that just catch your fancy. So you don't go in an auction wanting 35 items there. You're like, oh, I wouldn't mind having maybe that or that, but if I don't get it, it's not going to be the end of the world. I don't have to have that.
That's exactly right.
I mean, I have more fun now being the auctioneer at auctions like that because I just love to see. It's like you hold the power in the room in your hands, you know, because you're up there in the front and you're auctioning this stuff off. And I was this year during the North Texas auction. I was unfortunate; I was too sick to run it, but thank goodness Jim Kitchen was there. He just did a masterful job. But you know, I was looking at him during the auction, the audience. And I could see him. He had that audience in the palm of his hands thing.
Yep.
And
he was
Tim
working
Kask and Frank Mincer have talked about that too, where you've got everybody's looking at you, and you've got the power right there, you know. And so it's kind of it's fun. It's fun to do that, and then see somebody really happy they finally ended up with something they'd wanted a long time, and then usually whoever sold it's happy too because they've got a good price for the item, so everybody's happy. You know, everybody's going out happy except for
the guy who dropped out and lost out on it,
or the wife when you get home, and the wife that looks at the credit card bill and says, "What the hell?" You know?
There have been a number of times where, in hindsight, after losing an auction, I was really happy that I lost the auction because I got caught up in the moment, and it's not always a good thing. But you do a phenomenal job, obviously.
Well, thank
Mike.
you.
I don't want to. I don't. You know, I shouldn't be. Being too nice here, but it is great seeing, at the cons, the auctioning. You guys, you did a phenomenal job, especially Sick for the midnight auction. I don't know how you
I
pulled
had to
that
pull that
off.
one together, but I couldn't miss the midnight auction. I have so much fun doing that. That's as much fun for me as it is for everybody else. So
Yeah.
I had to do that, even though I was suffering so bad. Because Alex Kamer tried to kill me, as you pointed out. And I think,
He did.
you were absolutely correct,
Yeah.
Mark. And once I looked over all the evidence, it became very obvious that, Alex was jealous and tried to kill me at the Mavericks game the night before, and I didn't realize that. So I appreciate you opening my eyes to that, because
I also think it's because he's afraid that you're gonna get into the marathon business, or the tough mudder, and you're gonna challenge him.
Definitely, yeah. He doesn't want to be challenged in that. 'Cause, oh God, you guys are crazy doing that. He and Scott Brand do that stuff. That's nuts.
Yep.
Those ultra marathon bullshit, tough mudders where they're running around. They come out and they're covered head to toe in mud, and no. I'll sit in front of the TV and watch you do that. Why don't you go ahead and do that
with the beer? Because you got
with the beer and a piece of pizza. We'll talk about it later. Yeah.
Yeah, like I told one of my chiefs who wanted to go. She's like, Eric, why aren't you working out with everybody else? We have a workout team. I go, when I get home after a hard day of work, I lift 12 ounces at a time. And then I got transferred a few weeks later. So apparently answering that as a 12-ounce lift was not a good answer. I thought it was hilarious.
If you lift it enough times, it adds up, right?
It's repetitive motion.
And you know what? When it gets lighter through the lifting, I just swap it out to a fresh one.
Exactly.
It didn't go over. It sounded a lot funnier to me, but it just did not land well.
Didn't go over well. Bad audience there. It was the audience's fault.
There you go.
We covered Necromancer Games. We've got 9 more days for that. Necropolis. 9 more days. Necropolis.
So just to be clear, if you're out there and you haven't backed it, please back it. Please.
Come on.
I haven't hit it yet. I need to hit that myself. See, I work for Frog God, which actually doesn't translate into getting anything for free unless you actually did the work on it. But so I've had to start paying for my own stuff again.
See, you're a backer. You're a backer. I put $55.
Sheesh. Well, I gotta hit.
I own a mansion and a yacht. So there we go.
I'll get that in the next few days. So anyway, we're gonna segue from that to talking about some current events in gaming. And Mark, you're willing to join. You're welcome to join us in your opinion, because as you know, and one of the things. Mark knows this because this is Mark and I, but we like to get together during cons and we just talk about stuff. We'll sit for 2 hours and drink and talk things. I love to hear Mark's opinion on stuff. He's always got a great take. So we're going to throw a few things out. We'll see what your take is on them too. And Eric showed me a really interesting press release today from Steve Jackson Games. You want to pop that up there, Eric?
I popped it up for you.
You want to summarize this? So it's extremely interesting.
Freight and extinction level event, and we're going to just I think the first 2 paragraphs are really all we need to know. Global shipping is a nightmare. We have already apparently posted a few daily Luminary entries about the state of freight, and things are not getting better. Those costs threaten to devastate publishers. As an example of how freight is impacting games, our Car Wars 6th edition project acquired 5 containers, all on the water, slowly making their way to a primary warehouse, that each cost over 3 times more than they would have if the game had shipped in 2020. As many of you know, 2020 was the planned ship date. And then a global pandemic decided to enter the picture and completely disrupt our plan and the manufacturing schedule. So what it comes down to is that listen, as regular people, we know that shipping for the U.S. Postal Service can be throwing a real monkey wrench into a lot of these smaller Kickstarters. But shipping from China, which used to be relatively cheap, if your shipping costs are going up over 3 times, in the end result, it's going to impact the consumer. When you're buying your games, they got to pass it on. You can't blame Steve Jackson Games, Frog God Games, Wizards of the Coast, whoever is publishing stuff and having it done in China, because that cost has to get passed on.
Yeah, I mean the problem. I think the problem there was they'd already gotten the money for shipping.
Oh yeah. Oh,
and
they got,
so it was too
screwed.
late to pass it on.
Yeah. Oh, they got screwed, and that's happened. Listen, we've seen a lot of Kickstarters. I'm going to say one that sticks out in my mind: Myth and Magic. Who, when I received my copy of Myth and Magic, I expected to be soaked in piss or anthrax, because I pissed off the creator so much that he posted my shipping information as a comment on the Kickstarter, because I was very vocal, not just in the comments, but on my blog. And I give a lot of credit to Kickstarter. On a weekend, they had it removed within 2 hours of me making a complaint. But what happened with that project is he took so long to get it printed and ready that the shipping that he had assumed went up drastically within the States, but went up immensely if you were shipping out of the States. And since then, and we're going back, 6-7 years? Since then, shipping has gone up by a magnitude. So it is ridiculous. And if you are late on your shipping, you are now, unless you assume that, shipping is going to cost us 3 times more than we expected. Nobody expected that, right? This is being blindsided for Steve Jackson Games. Yeah. But how do you put that into it as a cost? Now, Steve Jackson Games admits they are lucky. They have some evergreen titles: Munchkin Deluxe, Zombie Dice, Illuminati 2nd Edition, that will basically cover the loss or cover the lack of profit that they're going to have on this. But smaller companies, I think we mentioned this one last week, Mike, Peterson Games.
The Cthulhu Wars. Yeah, this is the same thing that happened with Cthulhu Wars. And Sandy's out there asking for, look, we may have to charge more money because we're not able to ship this stuff. And this has become the problem with 2020 is because so much stuff was backed up because of not shipping on time. For those who don't know, postal rates used to have, the only way they could go up was the Postal Service had to present something to the United States government. It was voted on, and they voted whether or not they got a 2 or 3 cent raise. Well, several years ago, that power was given solely to the Postal Service. They're allowed to set rates as they wish. Now, I believe they cannot raise rates more than twice a year, but guess what? They're raising it twice a year, and they will raise the rates twice a year. So we've had this just within the last few years, this extremely high rate of how fast the postal shipping's gone up. And honestly, it probably was too cheap for quite a few years. It probably was cheaper than it should have been. But to make up for that, they are really jacking up the prices of shipping. International shipping has become so untenable that I know for Frog God Games, we no longer ship overseas. We do print on demand in different countries. It's become outrageous to ship overseas, especially with Kickstarters. If you do a Kickstarter in January and you charge X amount for shipping, and then the shipping goes up twice until you're ready to ship that November, you've lost money. And a lot of companies operate on a margin where they cannot afford to lose that. Really, nobody can afford to lose that kind of money.
Right.
There's some companies that really cannot afford to lose that kind of money.
Yeah, I mean, for a company that if you're a big publisher, that you might be able to, you might have the reserves to absorb the loss. But most of the small companies don't have much of a reserve. They just don't. And it's a 2-part problem, because you got to get the product, here into the U.S. and then you need to ship it. And I don't know what the cause of the increase in shipping from China is in this case. I know, last year, the year before, there was a lot of saber rattling between the Trump administration and China, and there was some real threats of increased tariffs that would have really put the kibosh on shipping. And for people who don't know, I mean, the problem is for the books like, and I'll hold it up again, my Lost Lands book, but you look at the size of this thing. it's library bound. So this is not a print on demand. It's not just glued. You've got full color, glossy paper. You cannot print that in the US competitively. You'd have to charge almost twice what you're currently being charged at a Kickstarter to be able, and people are not going to be willing to pay $120 just for a book.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. And so the only competitive way to do it has been to get it from China for quite some time. Now, obviously, if it's a smaller book, if it just, perfect bound, if you're just stapling it, yeah, you can do that print on demand and the quality can be fine. But for a thick book, you can't do that. It's got to be library bound. And at that point, it costs money to do it. It's prohibitive to do it in the US. If it becomes prohibitive to do it from overseas, it's a question. How can you produce books that people can and are willing to pay for at that point? And we'll see what ultimately happens. But ideally, the price of the shipping and all the costs. You build it in when you use backer kit or whatever fulfillment system. You just pass through to the consumer. But it's got to be a reasonable number. Nobody wants to pay ridiculous sums, and that's been the issue when you try to sell. If you try to take one of these books and put it overseas, send it to Europe or even Canada, it becomes incredibly expensive. And the other problem is I know that the frogs have seen damage done no matter how well you pack it. Talking about Jeff Emery, I remember Jeff bought something from one of the prior Kickstarters, and like 3 times it got to him and it had been damaged. And of course,
Jeff's ship was that's what I was doing, customer service. That was one of the things that changed everything was just the fact that we basically lost about $1,000 or $1,500 on Jeff's order alone because the cost of shipping out of the country, the fact the books were getting there damaged every time.
Right.
And I don't mean a ding. I mean, it looked like somebody ran a Mack truck over it. It was that bad. And so we have to replace the whole order at that point because that's just what we do at Frog Gut. And Jeff wasn't the only one. This has become a problem across the world in international shipping. It's just the rule of thumb with shipping, and this is why I do a lot of my shipping through priority mail, is the longer something is in the system, the more chance it has of getting damaged. And so, unfortunately, when you mail stuff internationally, it's usually in the system a long time. And it's going on planes, it's being transferred between planes. There's a lot better chance it's going to be damaged in the longer it's in the system. And that's why we were seeing a lot more stuff that went to Australia, that went to Europe, that went to Canada, that was damaged. And in the long run, it wasn't cost effective at all to do this. And that's why we now do print on demand overseas, which has actually been a pretty huge success. Now it sucks that a person in Hungary can't get the same quality hardback book that you could get if you were in Los Angeles, but that's just the way the system is now. I mean, we can't lose money on that, and most companies can't lose money doing that.
Yeah,
and so somebody said that shipping price eventually come down. I don't see that happening. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how.
Here's the thing. Well, if you're talking about shipping prices like containers, if the prices just tripled, yeah, they might go down by half, but that means they're going to still be 50% more than they were before this all happened. Nothing ever goes back to where it was. That is just a sign of reality of life. Whenever a price increase happens, it never goes back to its base price. You should be happy it's only 50% more than it was, than 300% more than it was. So don't expect that. Sorry, but.
Yeah, no, it's tough because look, nobody goes into the tabletop gaming industry thinking they're going to make some sort of massive fortune.
Well, hold on. You're telling me I'm not going to make a massive fortune?
No, that's not how they.
Okay.
You're going to spend a massive fortune.
That's not how it works. But
okay, all right.
When you look at one of these products. You've got an author, maybe multiple authors. You've got an editor. You've got layout. You've got artists. You've got cartographers, all of whom should be, at least as best as we can, properly compensated for the value they add to the product. I mean, I'm constantly amazed at the quality of the cartography and the art when working with Frog God and Necromancer. It's just phenomenal stuff. And, people need to eat. Nobody is doing this totally for free. Well, some people are.
Well, you are, Mark. But other
it's
than that,
pretty damn close. You can talk to Bill about that. But I mean, and I think people need to understand that when you get a quality product, there is a cost to it. But we have to be realistic. People are not going to pay $150 for a game book. It's just not going to happen.
We got some really, really good responses here. I want to grab a couple of us really quick. What Valvin says true. Tabletop gamers are crazy cheap. That's absolutely true. Return on investment is insane. People will spend $100 on a ticket for a show event that lasts 3 hours. I've seen people spend 3 times that for a meal. And you're right. These are the same people bitching that a book's $60 for a hardcover. And you're thinking, wait a second, you're going to get 5 years of use out of this book. You just ate that meal and you're going to crap it out in 2 hours. And so it costs 3 times that amount. So that's absolutely true, is that people don't understand the value cost. But Americans, or not just Americans, human beings, we're terrible at ratio analysis of stuff. We are. We're just bad at it. We always have been. Oh my gosh, I might die by a terrorist. No, you're probably going to get hit by a car. Your chances to die by a terrorist are like 1 in 30 million. But we're worried about but we have the TSA are now searching everybody's lunchbox, every old lady and kid under 2's toothpaste tube. But it's things like that. We don't understand things, and so we don't understand all the value we get out of gaming. That really what we're doing is it's very cheap for what we're getting, but we don't understand that. And if a book costs over $60, we're out. I am not.
There's also a sizable part of the community that I think looks at this as sort of open source, right? They like the idea that somebody does some work, creates an adventure, gets some cheap art or free art, and they put it up available on the internet where anybody can just grab it and take it for whether it's free or pay whatever you want or 50 cents. And look, I think there's a lot of place for that, right? I mean, if you want to be creative and you don't want to work for a company and you just want to take your home adventure and polish it up and get it out there so people can enjoy it, that's phenomenal, right? That's great. Nothing wrong with that. But that's if you want the kind of product that you get from a Frog God or a Troll Lord or Goodman or WotC, they're generally quality books written by your professional writers with professional editors and professional art, and there's got to be a cost to that. And the question is, what do you want to put into that, right? And yeah, I mean, it's expensive to produce if you want quality, and therefore there's got to be enough of a return. But if anybody out there thinks that any of these companies is like rolling in massive dough because of what they're publishing, they're not. Other with the possible exception of Hasbro. I think everybody else in the industry is hopefully profitable enough that it's worth continuing to do. But almost everybody I know has other jobs too.
I have wise man told me that in the game industry, there's probably 5 guys that make money. And I think that's probably pretty much true. And by money, I mean 5 guys that make a lot of money, or 5 people, not just guys. But that's probably true. Seriously, there's probably 5 people that have made a fortune in the industry, and everybody else is just there. Like you say, Mark, they have to have other jobs. It's tough to have this as a full-time job anymore.
We do it because it's fun. Yeah. Because we like doing it, we like the community, and that's the reason I do it is because this gives me a chance to be creative. I'm not just a consumer anymore, buying other people's stuff. I get to actually, put my own stuff out there. But I'm certainly not doing it because it's enhancing my retirement savings, because it's not. As the last time I got a payment from Bill, his comment was, "Well, here's some beer money."
You got beer. You got beer money. Holy crap!
And I don't drink very much beer. Yeah, I'm a Scotch guy.
It's a 5 guys selling hamburgers to convention. Yeah, and this is interesting too because one of the problems with it, and Bill Barr said something earlier. Said like, yeah, what he's been doing is pushing it back, get phase off to get closer to actual shipping date. That's usually what you do. The problem that happened last year was because of COVID, everybody got screwed. It didn't matter how quick you were. It's because everything got delayed because of China. China had to shut down their factories for 2 months. And so it wasn't just the fact that people were like, okay, well, I got this out as quick as I could. It was just the fact that everybody got caught in the same. And then, of course, once stuff starts backing up, it never gets caught up. It just can't. You can't catch up at this point. It's impossible to catch up. So from here on out, you're probably going to be late. Kickstarters are going to be late more than they're not going to be late, just because that's the nature of the beast, especially when you're talking, bigger books that get shipped from China.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's probably going to run a little late.
I will say, as a super backer on Kickstarter, I don't know what exactly I did to get that moniker.
Don't even say how many, because I
don't worry too much about a Kickstarter if it's going to be late because of operational issues or shipping or the like. That's that's par for the course. It's and I think we've learned a lot over the last 5 or 6 years. I backed a number of Kickstarters early on that never performed. And it's because I think, especially, I may have just given Eric a segue unintentionally.
But it is a segue, so I just figured I'd put it up. Continue.
So I think especially early on, Kickstarter was really backing hypothetical projects by creative people who could not fund what they wanted to do, and this was the only way they could do it. And it was hit or miss. I mean, I have a number that never ever performed of some of the earlier Kickstarters. Now the expectation is very different. The expectation really is, and it should be, I think, that of course there may be issues, right? There may be problems. Nobody's going to guarantee a date, but you should have your shit together so that you can get it done and get it out. And, and I think that, unfortunately there are still a few out there that maybe fall into the earlier camp, but they're still out there and still being talked about. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, we always talk about, Eric and I always talk about the fact that the whole Kickstarter paradigm has shifted so much from the way it was in the early days. Well, hey, I've got a great idea. Send me $100,000, and that's all they had was a great idea.
Right.
To now, I want to see that you've finished all your writing. I want to see your artwork, and I want to make sure you've got a track record of fulfilling your Kickstarters before I'm going to send you a dime. And we've because we've been burned too many times, right? We've all been burned.
Yeah.
And so we want more than a good idea. No, I don't want your good idea. Everybody's got a great idea. I want to see what you actually put down on paper, and it better be a finished manuscript.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Necropolis, the manuscript is finished. It's in layout. All the art is in, and all the cartography is in. Nice. So it is just a matter of finishing layout and getting it printed and shipped. But look, there's still a process there, and it's got to be printed and it's got to be shipped, and there are inherently possible delays in that. But yeah, I think that is increasingly the expectation, and reasonably so. That doesn't mean it has to be. And I've backed at least a couple recently that are not totally done, but I know who's doing it, and I have confidence in them. And is it still taking a bit of a risk? Yeah, sure, but you could be doing business with an established company. You buy something over the internet, and they could go bankrupt between the time you hit buy out of your cart and the time that they were going to ship it. So there's always some degree of risk.
But the risk that we used to have, was it Quantum, the RPG, which was like that was Frost, who was running a second Kickstarter because he put the money from the first Kickstarter into creating an office and a company, and not actually getting the game out.
Yeah,
which is something similar that Mike Nystall did. Gareth Skarka is going to be 10 years late at the end of this year with Far West because these were all people that were working on ideas and dreams, and like I said, had nothing written. Now I brought up Ernest Gary Gygax Jr.'s The Hobby Shop Dungeon, a GP Adventures Castle and Campaign Memorial Tomb. Too long a fucking name. Holy shit. But in any case, this is a Kickstarter that was toward the tail end of that, where it was still a great idea and a known name, and it raised over $126,000. And for the longest time, it seemed like we weren't going to get anything, and it's not because the money was pissed away. It just happened with other projects, Far West, City State, The Invincible Overlord. The money's not there, but the money was here. I knew it. I saw it. Ernie showed me the bank statement at a GaryCon a number of years ago. It wasn't done because neither Ernie nor Benoit were people that were used to doing projects, and this morphed into a project that was huger than either one of them probably had ever dreamed of, because it was doing so well. He kept on adding stretch goals every $2,500 or something like that, and it really was going to put a nail in the coffin. Trollord Games stepped up and basically put man hours into the project to do project management, to complete it, get it ready to go. Again, like I said, they couldn't do that. The money wasn't there. Huge props to Trollord for that. But then the issue became they were ready to say, hey, we're going to ship what we're going to ship, and you're not going to probably see many, if any, of the stretch goals because they weren't done. And Benoit stood up and said, listen, I'll take weekly deadlines to get out these stretch goals. And on Monday, he hit his third deadline and made it.
Yep.
And
which I think is more than anybody thought. I have to give him props.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody thought he would hit the third week. So good for him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think having a deadline. One of the advantages, frankly, of working for somebody else is, Zach or Bill would give me. He wouldn't be a hard and fast deadline, but it'd say, I need you to be done by this date, or we want to launch the Kickstarter by this date, and we need the manuscript to be done.
Right.
And when you have that kind of externally imposed deadline, it's oftentimes much easier to hit it than if you have an internally imposed deadline that that if you don't hit it, there's no consequences. And so I think in this context, probably for Ben, that this was having the deadlines probably was a great boost to the creativity and productivity. And it's, I backed this one at a pretty high level.
As did I.
And I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great product. I mean, I've seen some of the work that they've posted online. It's very creative looking, and I'm thrilled to see that more and more of it's being hit. But yeah, I mean, the big problem with a lot of these Kickstarters was going crazy with stretch goals, because you didn't take into account the combination of the time that you would need to take to create the stretch goal, and then get it produced, and then get it shipped when your box might not fit all those dice or minis or whatever you decided to add on. And again, I think just because, and this will come as no surprise to anybody who knows the industry, gamers are not necessarily the best business people. They're just not. And you can go back to TSR for proof of that. It's a long-standing issue that a great gamer doth not a good business person make. And I think a lot of them were just innocent mistakes, and then suddenly it turned into a monster that they just literally could not handle. Yeah. And project management is an incredibly important skill, really, in getting one of these things done. And I think a lot of the people now totally get that, and that's why I think it's been a while since I've seen a Kickstarter that I've either backed or been interested in that had these types of delays. Let's put it that way.
You can usually spot them too. At this point, you kind of look at it, and if they're have a Kickstarter and they're offering maps and shirts and hats and miniatures, you stay away from it. You're like there's too many different things. You need to stick with what you're good at. You're not going to be able to ship media mail once you stick a miniature in there or dice or whatever.
Yep.
And so when they start padding it, there's an issue. I mean, there's a lot of red flags now that we're pretty cognizant of, and I think a lot of those Kickstarters, frankly, I don't think they fund now. I think the ones that are questionable, people are aware enough to not fund them, and so the person has to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what did I do wrong? What do I need to change on this? And I think that's good. I'd rather they have them do that than to have them fund, and then the guys who's running the Kickstarter has no clue what to do, because that's what we used to see a lot of. But the people that are doing Kickstarter, I mean, most of the people that I know, let's take Greg Gillespie, for instance, who does all his own stuff. I mean, this guy knows what he's doing, So when I give him money, even though he's a solo person, I know I'm going to get a product out of it. And he obviously has a track record too. That's really hard for a lot of, like you said, it's really hard for people to work without a boss, the way you want to put it, without somebody to sit there and tell them that this has to come out now. You got to do this. You got to have your own goals. You got to self-motivate yourself, and you got to be the one that knows that I've got to have this done by this date and this done by that date. And it's really hard for some people to do that. They may be creative geniuses, but they're really terrible at basically budgeting their time for a project.
Well, and I think in a case like somebody like Gareth Skarka, with Gareth, I think the motivation left him once he got paid. It was a great idea, but once you got the money, and you already spent the money on health issues and emergency expenses. And what's the motivation then to complete the project when you've already spent the money? It's no longer there. So things like that are issues. And especially when you're working for yourself, when you're working for somebody else and you owe it, you've got that push. It's a whole, I guess it's hard for many people to, like Mike said, to self-motivate themselves.
Right.
Put their own limits on themselves and say, hey, you got to hit this.
There's also the issue of experience, right? I mean, working with Zach and Bill, these guys know what a Kickstarter is going to cost, what shipping is going to cost, what it's going to cost to get the product done. If you don't know all of that and you're making guesses, you can easily run out of money, because art doesn't cost as much as it should, to be honest, because these artists are phenomenal and I think they're underpaid, but it costs. Copy editing costs, printing costs. And if you haven't budgeted all of that and you start spending things on other things, or you overpay for things not realizing you're going to run out of money, you can get into trouble really fast if you're not careful. And I know for both World Lost Lands and Necropolis, we've been very focused on what can we offer that will not put us in a bind either for shipping or production or timing, which is why a lot of the stretch goals are electronic, because you don't have to worry about delivery. It doesn't add to something in the box. But because like a virtual tabletop is really valuable if you play online, it's a great stretch goal. It's a phenomenal stretch goal because it's a useful stretch goal to a lot of people. But it isn't going to prevent us from, finishing when we need to finish. So I think people have learned a lot. And at this point, for some companies, this is a pre-order system more than it is anything else.
Oh, yeah. And I've heard people complain that that's what it's turned into. And it's like, you should be happy it's turning into that. Because for a lot of these companies that are, I guess, like, first tier is Wizards of the Coast and Paizo. And second tier is Goodman Games and Frog God and Troll Lord. To know what your market is, to know how many copies you actually need, saves you from overproducing and possibly having a project that doesn't sell, putting you under.
Right.
I mean, that's always a risk, that balance. So Kickstarters are a great way to know what you need to produce, how many copies you need to actually get out there.
Yep. And look, I still will occasionally back a more speculative one because it's a creative enterprise and somebody wants to do something and they can't get it off the ground without the money. But when I do that, I recognize it's like a speculative investment. I
Right.
might see something, and I might not. And I think you have to go into that kind of situation. Me personally, I wouldn't do it if I felt that like it was so much money that I couldn't afford it, or that it was going to hurt if I lost it. And that if it doesn't perform, it's like, if you loan money to a friend, never expect it back. And
Yeah.
that way you're not going to ruin your relationship. And if it's a speculative Kickstarter, treat it that way, and recognize that, unless there's outright fraud, somebody just took the money and ran with it. If they really tried to produce and they failed because of inexperience or even incompetence, I think you have to sort of accept that, if that's the risk of the type of Kickstarter you want to pay for. The issue is, of course, back in the day, people didn't realize that as much. It was
No.
you sort of,
Yeah.
people thought, hey, look, if I'm backing this, I'm going to get it, and I'm going to get it on the date they say. And then it didn't happen for, not a lot, but certainly a number of well-known Kickstarters.
All right. Before we wrap this up, I want to touch on one last thing, and that's
yes.
Gen Con.
Yeah.
Talk about this for just a little bit. Yeah.
So now Gen Con already pushed their date back because of COVID. But Mike, what's going on now?
They are saying don't worry about, we're not going to do any vax passports, but you're going to wear a mask. And so they've already canceled the auction there. They have limited dealer room hours, which honestly, if I was even thinking of going, that would probably push me over to not going, because I love the auction and I love the dealer room, and I don't think I'm going to any convention with over 30,000 people ever again in my life anyway at this point. But yes, so they're going to have they are going to have mask mandates at Gen Con this year. Now, I think the problem with this is I'm not opposed to mask mandates. I don't think most reasonable people are. What I've seen, the anger online about this is this just came up within 5 weeks of the convention. It's kind of and by the way, everybody has to wear a mask now. Now, it still shouldn't be that much of an inconvenience, but I think it's kind of troubling that they're changing the rules this late in the game. This probably should have been something. Yes, I know that we all thought that we beat COVID and we were raising the, mission accomplished flag way too early. But it is a bad look when you have to change the rules this far into the game and say, well, suddenly we change everything. Now you have to wear a mask unless you're eating. I guess if somebody's eating, as long as you have a Snickers bar in your hand, you can not wear a mask the whole con. Or a hot dog.
It is poorly written, and since we have a lawyer in the room, mask wearing will be required in all indoor and crowded outdoor Gen Con spaces. You must be wearing a mask while attending Gen Con Indy, unless you are actively eating or drinking. So now, what if you're not in a crowded outdoor space? What if the space in your mind isn't crowded? According to them, you're not required to mask. The next sentence says, unless you're eating and drinking, you must be masked. I as somebody who spent 20 years in law enforcement and had to deal with directives and operations orders, and I used to be the one that would really grind my teeth at something that was poorly written that literally could be interpreted different ways depending on how the rules lawyer wants to read it. This is horrible. This is just, because somebody's
does this mean if I carry a soda around, I never have to wear a mask? That's what it reads to me. And somebody walks up to me and says, "Put your mask on." I'm like, "Soda, drinking."
I got a straw in my mouth the whole time. I'll just keep an empty soda, soda cup in my hand with the straw in my mouth. And again, stuff like this, we are a gaming community. We are used to game lawyers, right? It's like, I hate the rule lawyers in the game because they really annoy me and I hate it. You just gave these people multiple ways to game the rules. Why? Why did you even do that? And by the way, later on in the same thing, they say, "Oh, and we're not ruling out a vaccine mandate. We just don't know yet."
Yeah.
Boy, and I tell you what, you want to hear screams that will reach every part of the world is decide 1 week before you're going to have a vax mandate. That's not good. And I know, and and I can't say with hindsight that I would have done things any differently than they did, because things look different 2 or 3 months ago. They really did. But this reeks to me that we're not going to cancel because we can't afford to cancel. So we're going
Right.
to do whatever it takes to have the con, even if it's maybe not that effective. It may be, this is more performance theater. Like, yeah, everybody wear a mask unless you're drinking or eating. And that now we did our due diligence. We did what we needed to do. Okay, everybody's okay. And I don't. Yeah, the whole thing is just it's very. I mean, look, these big cons, they have to go on because they're big business. This is a big business, Gen Con's a big business, and they really can't miss another year like they did last year. They're going to have to put this on, so they're going to do what it takes to put it on. It's probably going to piss off a lot of people in the long run, but I mean, they have to do it because they've got bills to pay. They've got staff. I mean, this is like I said, it's a business. This is not a little con like North Texas run by 5 people. This is a business employing hundreds of people, or if not thousands of people, and it's a big money maker for the city as well as the industry, and it's going to happen. They're going to figure out some way to get it to happen. And they're probably going to piss some people off along the way. I have a feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad for the people running Gen Con this year, because their timing is awful. Yeah, I mean, this is a no-win situation. I mean, from the impression I get is they really need to run the con this year, or there's a question as to whether they'll have the financing to run it.
I absolutely agree with you, Mark. Yeah,
they missed one. I don't know what their contracts say, but certainly the implication was they really needed to run it this year.
Oh God. Yes.
And so then what do you do? Because you obviously want to keep people safe. You don't want to become known as the super spreader event of 2021.
No, that was Lollapalooza. They already did that.
Right. We've already done one of them.
Yeah.
But I mean, what are they going to do at this point? So, and unfortunately, with the Delta variant out there, and with the rate of spread that we're seeing, and Indiana has been the urban areas less so, but large parts of Indiana have seen a pretty widespread spread right now. Yeah. We don't know what things are going to look like in September, and what are they going to do? Do you have a mask mandate? Do you do a vaccine mandate? And they're kind of just unfortunately they made a decision which seemed to make a lot of sense earlier, and then it doesn't. Now things are changing. It looks worse. What are they going to do? So I feel bad for them, because whatever decision they make at this point is going to piss off or upset or anger a substantial portion of the people attending. And I know, I ended up, I really wanted to go, and I ended up not going. This will come as a surprise to those who were at the beginning of this this video, because there wasn't going to be an auction. So that was the deciding factor for me. But if I were to have to game with a mask on all day will be a little uncomfortable. I mean, it is going to be uncomfortable. On the other hand, discomfort, if I wanted to be there and wanted to game there, I'd prefer discomfort than either getting sick or giving it to somebody else if I was transmitting, and didn't know it. So I don't know. This is a no-win situation. And they unfortunately, if the con had been last month, it would have been no big deal.
I was gonna say, that's the irony of this. If it had gone when it usually comes, and I know they pushed it back a month because they thought they were doing the right thing, but honestly, if it had been the 1st of August, it'd be in the books, and it would have been thumbs up, mission accomplished. But this is man, this just turned out terrible for them, having delayed it a month. Because they're getting right into when we're having the largest COVID numbers we've had in the last year, and they're moving into September. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see something come up, because, look, and the thing is, like I don't know how you can have something like Lollapalooza go on and not have a Gen Con go on. I mean, you just have to do it the right way. I think that they would be safer about it than Lollapalooza was. I mean, I still think that thing was just an absolute joke, the way that was allowed to happen, but yeah, I mean, you could do this the right way. You're just going to have to make allowances, and people are just going to, I know they're going to be pissy and bitchy, but I mean, do you want a con or not?
Yep.
And
Right.
look, we may have this going. Eric and I have speculated on how bad it may be next year for cons like Total Con and Gary Con, which have already had to cancel. Gary Con's had to cancel 2 years in a row already.
Yep.
And Total Con this year, well, we may be rolling right into flu season. I haven't talked to Alex about Gamehole Con, but they have to be worried about that too. Although,
Right.
And if there's anybody who's going to be careful about a con, it's going to be Alex in Gamehole.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And he's going to go exactly what the health department tells him to do.
Yep.
So if the health department tells them it's not safe to have a con, they're not going to have a con, which would be an absolute tragedy, considering how much work they've done on it, and the fact he's already paid for the venue and everything. I think the way things are now, I think they're going to allow these large events to happen with caveats, massive caveats. And
Right.
I think maybe last year we were too cautious, and I think it took a huge toll economically because we were overly cautious that every business had to shut down, even ones that probably could have stayed open, but we were just basically painting with this huge broad brush. So I think now we can decide, okay, which are the best behaviors? Let's not let these people come. Let's let these people come. Let's everybody do this and nobody do this. I think you can pick and choose a lot better the kind of behaviors you want to promote that will let an event like this actually happen. But it's still something everybody's going to have to think about. And Eric and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, our days of larger cons may be over because I don't really want to go to a con with 30,000 people anymore. Not just because of COVID, just because it makes you aware of the fact that people get sick at these cons a lot. I've gotten sick at cons much smaller than Gen Con, and you've got a lot of sick people at these cons. And I'm not no spring chicken. I'm in my 50s, so it's time to start thinking about, is this worth my fun to go to this con and have some ill-mannered 25-year-old cough all over me, and then he walks off and he's fine. Next 3 weeks I'm in bed with pneumonia. So.
Well, I hope you're wrong, because I really want to go to Gen Con again next year. And I will tell you, I am thrilled that we were able to pull off North Texas, because, oh my God, I had so much fun. Oh, I just wish Doug had been able to be there, but he's out of the hospital.
Well, you're our third guest in a row that actually went to North Texas. So when we last couple minutes here, tell us about your North Texas experience, because you were at North Texas also this year.
Oh, I mean, I'll tell you something. I don't think, I've been playing, with my home game through Zoom. I had not really realized how much I missed being around people, being around the people I knew, playing games together. Yep. It felt like I'd gone back 100 years or something. It was really, I had a phenomenal time. You guys did a great job.
Thank you.
But getting to see, my friends, and look, at this point, I'd say the vast majority of my friends are through the gaming community, and seeing people I hadn't seen in 2 years. Sitting down at a table and gaming with them was just a phenomenal experience. So I am thrilled. And the temperature wasn't so bad, it wasn't the usual 104 degrees in the shade.
Mild summer, beautiful summer.
Dallas. But no, I mean, it was great. I managed to avoid buying too much stuff, which is always a good sign. Did buy a couple of things, at the auction, but not too much.
People were really, we talked about this, but people were just so happy just to be able to game together. And just, like you said, to see, it wasn't just seeing anybody, it was seeing people that you've known, because look, we see each other every year during Gary Con, we see each other for Gamehole Con. We, some of us all go to Gen Con also. I haven't been in many years, but we see each other every year at these events. You get used to seeing these guys 2 or 3 times every year, just like clockwork.
Did you notice the shirt?
Yes.
That I got?
North Texas.
It's my Knight Chancellor shirt.
Yes, I need to
you
get.
Guys, you guys you still owe me my shirt for this year, though.
Oh, and we got to do something about that. Yeah, once Doug gets on the mend a little more, we'll
Yeah, no,
hopefully start seeing those shirts out. Because
no rush, needless to say. And when you see Doug, let him know that we are all pulling for him, and it is great that he's home and on the mend.
he's doing a little better. I haven't talked to him this week, but he's every week he does a little better. He's just got a long road to recovery ahead of him. I mean,
Yeah.
he had massive surgery, and
Well, he was in the hospital.
He's getting a little better.
He was in the hospital for a long time.
9 weeks. He was
just
9
that.
weeks. Yeah.
Just that takes a lot out of your health.
Oh, sure.
So
yeah, the first time when he was walking around the house, the first few days when he was back, he said he would just tire out walking from the living room to the bedroom because he wasn't walking at all in the hospital.
Yeah.
Even at rehab, they weren't really having him walk. So he's just getting used to being at home and walking around, and he's taking it really easy. That's for him. If you know Doug, he is type A personality. That is really tough for him just to take it easy and say, so just lay back, sit down, let everybody else do the work, and so. He still hasn't even been up to the warehouse yet, so he's really I don't think he can drive yet, so we're hoping he'll be ready for next year and we'll be ready to roll. So
well, and hopefully next year everything will be back to normal and
as normal as we can get. Yeah,
I'm just glad that we managed to get that in. Because I don't know if there's going to be a game hall. I hope there will be. I don't know if there's going to be a Gary Con. I hope there will be. But you guys hit the sweet spot. You really did.
We were very lucky. And Eric and I had talked about this, and we don't really have enough time to go into it. But we had talked about the possibility that we may be seeing the demise of the October to February conventions because the next few years we've still got a COVID. We've still got COVID on the horizon for the next few years, and it's flu season anyway. Yep. So you may not see as many cold winter conventions just for the fact that we're going to have outbreaks probably every year now for the next few years.
Yeah, I mean,
how many times could Gary Con be canceled? Before you're
I don't
like,
think
we can't do this in February.
I don't think it probably could be canceled again. That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, because it also. It's a small business, it's a family business, but it's still a business. And, the family doesn't have huge deep pockets that they can just say, okay, we can take a, $50,000 loss this year because we're not running a con. They can't do that. So it's, they got to make money on these things to keep it going. And that's like it goes back to the publishing. You don't have to make a lot of money, but you gotta at least break even and make a little bit, so that you can reinvest in the subsequent years.
There's very few businesses that can remain closed that long and still succeed. That's very tough to say. We missed 2 more years, we're going to miss another year, or we even missing 1 year, then missing another year is tough. I mean, that's tough enough, but missing 3 years in a row is.
I think Matt Melman made a point, which I think is exactly right. One of the reasons why these cons tend to be that time of year is they're cheaper. I mean, who's going to Lake Geneva in March normally?
Right.
It's not the summer season. You're not going to golf, and you're not going for the winter sports, which you can do earlier. So it's a great time for a convention in Lake Geneva. Right. And that's and I'm sure to some extent that's the logic behind having Game Hall in October or November as well. That it's affordability. So is it practical? I don't know, but you're right. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what ultimately happens, but hopefully, we'll get this under control eventually, and it'll just become part of the background, and we can go back to
your flu shot, your COVID shot, your booster will be part of the COVID, your flu shot, all that. Before we sign out, Dandelion Games had a question about running a Kickstarter minus it'll be complete minus part of the art. Keep that question in mind. In the next couple of weeks, we haven't scheduled Joe Block yet for an actual Wednesday, but he's agreed to come on. We just have to work out a schedule. Joe Block runs his Kickstarters, and it's basically to fund the art. So Joe can be a great person to ask that question of. Yeah. None of us here can answer that question for you anywhere near as well as Joe can. So just stand by.
Lou, we can talk about that in the next few. Do we have a date for our next couple of games?
No, but we know we got to schedule Joe Block. Jeff Jones, my
Jeff
layout
Jones.
artist, is going to be doing a Kickstarter. I want to get him on, and he's just a great guy to talk to. Anyway, and we may have to invite Venture on because Rich and I have been invited as special guests to his con next summer, and I don't know if I can make it yet because it's a year out, and but it's flattering. But Venture is certainly somebody who I have questions about how he runs Kickstarters because he gets some amazing art, and I like some insight in how he does that. So we'll have some interesting guests coming.
Yeah, we'll have some good.
Not as interesting as Mark.
No.
But
no. But yeah, you're going to get a lot of good Kickstarter advice this week, and then the next few weeks we'll try to have those kind of people on that will talk about Kickstarters, and we're pretty honest. Eric and I are both pretty honest about Kickstarters, and if we don't, I mean, we've never had any problem attacking Kickstarters that don't do their job or that don't complete their tasks. Especially Eric, he's been a bulldog about those kind of things. So
I'm so well loved. I know.
Yeah, I would also say there's a community out here of people who've done Kickstarters, and reach out to the people who've done them, because I don't know anybody who's not going to be totally thrilled to share best practices, their advice. People have been through it all before, and so if you're going to do a Kickstarter, there are people out there who can give you some really good advice. And I know some people do, like, there's like a small press publishing seminar that a couple of, like, I forget who they are, a couple of nobodies. But they sort of do those seminars at some of the cons. So you might you could attend that, even though you probably won't. They're kind of questionable personalities.
Mosquito and Zachariah.
Yeah.
To be all kidding aside, Skeeter and Zach would be incredible sources of information for this kind of thing.
It's a great community, and people will share in this community. I mean, nobody has secrets they're not going to give you. They're no, I got a secret about Kickstarters I'm not going to tell you. Nobody does that. They're all very, very forthcoming about what you need to do and what you should be looking out for. So,
yep. Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, for coming on the show.
Thank you guys for having me.
735th interview before the Kickstarter's over. What are you going to do with your time when you're not doing interviews for the Kickstarter? I don't even know what you're going to do.
I don't know. Mow the lawn.
It's overrated. I do that crap too.
The grass is like this already. I'm going to lose small children in my yard.
All right. The normal wrap up, and as I always do it, listen, we're still in the world of COVID. Use your common sense. I'm not going to be a big speech. We've already touched on it, talking about the conventions. Use your common sense. Keep yourself, your family, your friends, your loved ones healthy and safe. Be safe, be well. God bless. Roll those dice. And I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday with a live stream with Chippy Joe the Lawyer at 8 o'clock. And Saturday, Rach and I doing Gamers Health. All right, folks. Again,
see ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Later.